Hey guys, DC Network here, coming at you with another video. The Powerpuff Girls was obviously a very popular series from Cartoon Network's past. The original show had a very long run on the channel, getting a movie, eventually getting a reboot in the 2010s, and now, as we all know, they're working on some sort of sequel series or spin-off series to the original show. We even had that canceled live-action series titled Powerpuff that was in the works over at the CW, but apparently those were not the only Powerpuff Girls series that were in development over at Cartoon Network. Recently it came out on Twitter that apparently in the 2010s, Cartoon Network was actually planning a remake of the original Powerpuff Girls in CG. So Brian A. Miller posted on Twitter recently saying in the 2010s, everyone was buzzing about CG taking the place of 2D animation. In 2013, a Cartoon Network partner approached us about remaking the Powerpuff Girls in CG. Their idea was to literally take the classic episodes and redo them in CG. I wasn't a fan of it. It eventually died. The characters lend themselves well to the medium, but why mess with the classic stories? And there's also a couple images that show some of the pre-production stuff, like a title card, the project assumptions, what they're trying to do with it, some episode titles, and probably the most interesting image out of them all is that there's actually an image of the 3D models that they did for all of the characters, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I'm not really a fan of the look that they were going for here. They kind of look like little claymations to me, something that you would see in a stop motion short as opposed to a full-on series, but nevertheless, yeah, apparently Cartoon Network was developing a CG remake of the original Powerpuff Girls that was literally going to be a one-to-one adaptation of the original series, and there's a lot of interesting things that we can take away from this. First and foremost, I want to talk about the CG aspect as a whole and the interesting thing that happened with Cartoon Network in the 2010s regarding CG and what this project actually probably turned into. And then also I want to discuss the just idea of having a remake of an old classic series in general, such as the Powerpuff Girls. So first and foremost, regarding this CG remake that would have happened, I don't really think it would have been all that great of an idea, if I'm being honest, just because I feel like this is something that we see a lot within the animation industry today. If you just look at the kids' theatrical movie releases over the past 5 to 6, 7, 8, or 9 years, even the past decade if you want to go that far, the majority of them have been in CG. We don't really see a lot of 2D animated movies anymore outside of the handful that we get every so often. Like, for example, the Spider-Verse films are obviously 2D animation, but for the most part, the kids' animated theatrical film space has really just become a CG landscape. They've really ditched 2D animation in favor of making CG movies, and as we've seen just in general, like if you look at Nickelodeon, this kind of reminds me of what they're doing. Like, we've seen a lot of Nickelodeon series move over to CG. Some of their new projects, like for example, we had the whole Rugrats reboot, which turned into a CG show for the Rugrats. In my opinion, look, I don't dislike CG. Like, Star Wars The Clone Wars is obviously a CG animated series. It's one of my favorite animated shows of all time, but I feel like if you just make everything CG, it kind of just water downs the medium and kind of just makes a lot of the series just lose their character. Like, imagine these Spider-Verse films, Across the Spider-Verse or Into the Spider-Verse in CG. Those movies are so well known for their art style. Like, the art style makes those films, and if it was CG, it would lose a lot of the character that's established by the art direction that they went with. So in general, I think that it's probably a good thing they didn't remake the Powerpuff Girls in CG, but what is interesting about this is I was planning a video for a while now, I just haven't gotten around to making it, about how Cartoon Network started experimenting with CG in the mid 2010s or early 2010s. If you guys remember, there actually was a CGI Powerpuff Girls special in the 2010s. It was titled The Powerpuff Girls Dance Panstead, and it was a little short animated special that they premiered on Cartoon Network. They also did one for Courage the Cowardly Dog called The Fog of Courage, and of course there was the whole Ben 10 Destroy All Aliens movie. So clearly Cartoon Network was trying to experiment with CGI in this time period, and probably, in my opinion, this Powerpuff Girls CG remake probably end up getting canned in favor of doing Dance Panstead. I feel like someone internally at Cartoon Network was probably like, yeah, maybe this isn't the greatest idea to remake this series, but why don't we do a CGI short just as a test, and maybe if it does well, we'll do a CGI series of the Powerpuff Girls, just like they did the same thing for Courage the Cowardly Dog, and obviously we got the Ben 10 CGI film. But with Destroy All Aliens, that Ben 10 movie, I feel like that was never meant to be anything more than just, hey, here's a CGI CGI Ben 10 movie. I don't think they were ever going to make a CGI Ben 10 after that. And if you guys remember, there was also that CGI Batman show. I believe it was called Beware the Batman, that also premiered during this time period. So as you can see, they were definitely in-house experimenting with the idea of making a lot of CG series, but it never really went anywhere because Cartoon Network really never went down that direction with any of their shows. All of the shows that have premiered on Cartoon Network over, the past few years have all been in 2D animations. Quite frankly, I feel like, not to say that I hate CG, because I do like CG, I think there are some fantastic CG films out there, but I think it's good to have a happy medium. I don't think everything should be CG. I think 2D animation definitely has a place in the industry, and honestly, it's probably the preferred medium amongst most fans. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is just the idea of a remake of a series in general, because this is something that obviously happens a lot within the media landscape. Usually it happens more so with live action projects, where we see a live action movie or a live action series get a remake where they try to recreate the show but in a modern day with a modern lens. We don't really see this as much in the animation space. Usually these series get rebooted or revived as opposed to just getting a straight one-for-one remake. That's usually what we see in animation. But with the idea of a show getting a remake in general, I don't necessarily think it's a terrible idea, depending on how far back we're going and depending on what the series actually is. Like, for example, Dragon Ball Z has a remake. Dragon Ball Z Kai is the remake of Dragon Ball Z, and that serves as a remake for DBZ because DBZ, if you've ever watched it, there's a lot of filler in there. There's a lot of just stuff that's dragged out. Like, I watched Dragon Ball Z for the first time as a kid on those orange DVD box sets. Shout out to anyone who remembers those. And I don't really remember all of this all too well because, like I said, it was many moons ago, but I've looked up clips of like when Goku goes Super Saiyan 3 for the first time, and it's like 3 or 4 minutes of him just straight screaming and the earth shaking. Like, that stuff needs to be cut out. So the fact that they made a remake for Dragon Ball Z titled Dragon Ball Z Kai, it serves as a way to streamline the series and make it easier for people to watch it. I think that's a good thing in that sort of sense. Another series that I think could desperately use a remake at some point, I know it's relatively new, but I feel like Boruto or even Naruto Shippuden, I feel like those two series could use remakes, just because with Naruto Shippuden, there's so much filler in the series. There's 500 episodes and like half of them are actually pertaining to the story at hand. Furthermore, with Naruto Shippuden, I think the pacing of the series is an absolute mess at times, so if you remake the show, you can fix all of that. Similar issues with Boruto. Boruto just has the weird thing going on with it that there's an anime canon and a manga canon, and some of the anime canon episodes, quote unquote, that you need to watch in order to understand the story that's being adapted from the manga, a lot of them are pretty bad and the pacing is terrible in a lot of cases. So shows like that deserve a remake to fix the problems that the original show had. But something like the Powerpuff Girls, does it really need a remake? And I would say right now, no. But if like in 10-15 years from now you decide to make a HD remake of the Powerpuff Girls and you don't really change anything, you kind of keep it the same and just, keep it faithful to what the original series went out to do, the stories that it went out to tell, I don't really have a huge problem with that. Like, yeah, you don't need to do that. You could just remaster the series and call it a day, and I think that would probably be the better route to go. But if for whatever reason in like 10 years from now, let's say it's like the 40th anniversary of the show or something like that, or the 30th anniversary of the show, whatever that's up to, I believe it premiered in 1998, so yeah, it would be the 30-year anniversary in 2028 and then the 40-year anniversary in 2038. Let's say for the 40-year anniversary they decide to, hey, let's remake the series in like 4K for the first time ever, and we're gonna do this like really high quality animation style. We're gonna make a lot of the action sequences just really high quality, and it's gonna be some of the best action you've seen in animation to date. I don't really have a huge problem with that, if I'm being honest. Like, right now I would say leave it alone. If you're gonna do anything with the Powerpuff Girls right now, you could remaster it in HD and release it on Blu-ray for the first time. I think many people would be happy in seeing that. But if like 10-15 years down the line they decide, hey, we're gonna remake this show, just because there's a lot of our older series that really deserve to be touched up and just be made in the modern day with a modern lens on them, just to make them fresh and bring them to new viewers who weren't around 30-40 years ago when these shows premiered, that I don't have a huge problem with, in all honesty. Like, I feel like when it comes to Cartoon Network in general, they're not the best when it comes to preserving their library. A lot of their shows disappear over time, so if you decide to remake some of these series that disappeared, many moons ago, I don't really have a huge problem with that if they do it right and do it, like I said, in 10-15 years from now. I don't think these series need to be remade right now because they're still fresh enough where if if you're someone who, let's say you're a kid today who didn't grow up in 1998, you weren't around when the original show was on the air, you can still find your way to see it and it still stands up today. But in like 10, 15, 20 years from now, if you decide, hey, we're going to remake this show for the people who weren't alive 30, 40 years ago so they can watch it and see their own version of this series that is an instant classic, again, I don't have a huge problem with them doing that. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section below. What do you guys think about the fact that apparently there was a CG remake of the Powerpuff Girls that was in development but got canceled for whatever reason? And what do you think about remakes in general? Do you agree with me? If enough time passes, they can serve their place and can actually be a good thing for a series? Or would you rather these networks and these executives never touch the classics because you're afraid they'll ruin them? If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this from DC Network. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.